Here's a little interesting study that was done on kindness. They discovered through these obscure methods for measuring something called serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter in the brain that is responsible for the chemical feeling of feeling good. So that when you take an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety pill, generally they are designed to promote and stimulate the production of serotonin from the brain. And the more serotonin you have in you, the more you feel good. Artificially, but you still feel good. It's very difficult to measure serotonin. Through the metabolites in the urine, they can determine how much serotonin is being produced in the body. And they discovered this, that when a person is the recipient of an act of kindness, that is, someone does something nice for someone else, that it stimulates the production of serotonin automatically, an act of kindness. And it also strengthens the immune system. So that two things happen when you receive kindness from someone. One, serotonin levels are increased. Two, immune system is strengthened. They also discovered that in the act of giving or providing an act of kindness, just being kind to another human being has the same effect. That is, it increases the production of serotonin in your body as a giver, a provider of an act of kindness. And two, it strengthens your immune system. So whether you receive an act of kindness or whether you offer an act of kindness, you strengthen your immune system and you also get the benefit of feeling good through the production of serotonin, which we try to do artificially by giving people drugs. But even more intriguing than that is the following result of this same experiment. That the observer of an act of kindness, that all you have to do is be in the energy field and see someone else receiving an act of kindness, and your serotonin levels are increased and your immune system is strengthened. Just by being in the energy field of it or watching it. If you remember during the 9/11 horror that took place a few years ago, that they would often show stories of people just out there giving water to the firemen. And you would see strangers, you'd see a fire truck arriving from Iowa, drove all the way to Manhattan. And all of these volunteer firemen get out and they're going in there to go into burning buildings and clean up the mess and so on, just out of an act of kindness, just wanting to be kind to each other. And you sit there in your home and you feel good. It's a natural thing to have our serotonin levels increase. The more serotonin, the better we feel. And what do we want to feel? We want to feel good. And feeling good means I want to feel God. It is natural to want to be connected to your source. You came from it. Why would you want to be separate from it? So anything that will get you connected to your source is natural. So what's the solution to the problems of the world? Kindness. It's a simple thing. It was the last thing that Aldous Huxley said when they asked him about his life. He said, all we have to do is learn to be a little kinder, and we'll solve the problems of the universe. So that the problems that we face in the Middle East and the problems that we face in our inner cities and the problems that we face with drugs and all of it, it's all about being kind. But yet, how often do you see people wanting to punish people, people wanting to extend the opposite of kindness as frequently as we can? How often do we have governments that do nothing but want to do as much as we possibly can to be unkind toward people? How often do you go to an office or a business that is run by people who don't really have kindness as their motivating drive? Just go to get your driver's license renewed. I mean, everybody can relate to that. I mean, I just had that experience just recently of having to have a driver's license replaced. And people of all stripes and colors and languages and so on lined up outside the street, sitting around, waiting and waiting and waiting. And when they would go in, being talked to in rude ways and so on, and wondering why there's so much stress and so much anxiety. And most of the people in there looked so unhappy. The people who were working there, the people who were taking the test, the people, all of it. Where's the kindness? Acts of kindness. My daughter, Summer, wrote a story in her college freshman class, and I thought I'd share it here with you. I was getting off the turnpike one rainy afternoon, and I pulled up to the toll booth while fumbling through my purse. The woman smiled at me and said, "The car before you paid your toll." I told her I was traveling alone and extended my money, and she said, "Yes, the man instructed me to tell the next person who came to my booth to have a brighter day." That small act of kindness did give me a brighter day. I felt so moved by someone I would never even know. I began to wonder how I could brighten someone else's day. I called my best friend and told her about my paid toll. She said she'd never thought of doing this, but that it was a great idea. She goes to the University of Kentucky and decided to pay for the person behind her every day on her way to school as she exits the toll road. I laughed at her sincerity. "You think I'm kidding?" she said. "But like you said, it's only 50 cents. As we hung up, I wondered if the man who paid my toll even fathomed that his thoughtfulness would travel to Kentucky. I had an opportunity to extend kindness at the supermarket one day when I had my cart filled to the top with the food that my roommate and I would share over the next 2 weeks. The woman behind me had an antsy toddler and not nearly as much in her cart as I had, and I said to her, "Why don't you go ahead of me? You don't have nearly as much as I do." She replied, "Thank you so much. I haven't seen many people around here be thoughtful of another person. We've moved here from Virginia and are considering moving back because we're questioning whether this is the right place to raise our 3 children." Then she told me that she was about ready to give up and move back home, and even though it would create a huge financial strain on her family, she said, "I'd promised myself if I didn't see a sign by the end of the day, I was going to demand that we move back to Virginia. And you are my sign." She thanked me again, smiling as she left the store. I was flabbergasted, realizing that such a small gesture impacted an entire family. The clerk said as she was checking me out, "You know what, girl? You just made my day." I walked out smiling and wondered how many people my act of kindness would affect. The other day I was getting a breakfast sandwich and coffee and thought my coworkers might like some donuts. The 4 guys I work with at the stables live in this little apartment at the front of the barns. None of them have a car, but they share a bicycle. I explained to them that the donuts were for them. The look of gratitude on each of their faces was rewarding in an immeasurable way. I haven't worked there all that long, and I think that those 12 small donuts helped to break the ice a little bit. My small act of kindness turned into something huge as the week went on. We started looking out for one another more carefully and working like a team. Isn't that great? It is my intention to live at peace. To live at peace with my friends, my relatives, with everyone in my life. I just have to watch what kinds of thoughts emerge from the container of my beingness. And when those thoughts are not in a state of kindness, and I think that the solution to so many of these problems that we think are so insurmountable are immediately solvable by returning ourselves to kindness and by offering specific act of kindness whenever it is that we can. And when you see an act of kindness, or when you act in this way, not only do you get a serotonin rush, which is what it is, and you can make it happen just by observing it and offering it and extending it, and something that I urge you to practice on a regular basis and watch and see how your intentions begin to match up with this source energy, which is nothing but kind and nothing but forthcoming, nothing but giving, creating out of kindness. If the universal source that is capable of creating worlds, and does, had ever as its intention the thought of creating anything that it was unkindly toward, creation would stop. And your ability to create what you want in your life stops when you don't match up that way. So I put together just a little mini package of suggestions for having the peace that you desire for yourself. 1, I suggest that you identify your intentions verbally and often in writing, and develop a deep yearning for it. A deep yearning for what it is that you intend to create in your life. Then 2, intend for everyone in your life, including all of your relatives, what you intend for yourself. If you're struggling with your in-laws, if you're struggling with somebody in your family that you don't get along with, if you're having difficulty with somebody that you're working with, a coworker or someone, if you're struggling with an ex-spouse or whatever, intend for them the peace that you desire for yourself. Intend it even more for them. And then 3rd, be the peace that you're seeking from others. Be that. Don't be anything other than that which you are seeking from others. If peace is missing in your relationships with your family, it means that you have a place within you that is occupied by non-peace. It may be filled with anxiety, fear, anger, depression, guilt, or any low-energy emotion. Rather than attempting to rid yourself of these feelings all at once, treat them the same as your relatives. Say a friendly hello to the non-peace and let it be. You're sending a peaceful feeling to the non-peace feeling. Just direct this peace towards others. Then 4, begin the process of acting as if what you intended to manifest is already true. Begin that process. If you're having trouble getting along with someone and not having peace in your life, just begin a process of acting as if what you would really like to have in that relationship already exists. It happened for me with my ex-wife, going through a difficult time. And I went through an experience of deep meditation and also of hypnosis, self-hypnosis, something called the 15 steps. And I went into this hypnotic process, and I went to this place where I confronted her and her demands and what she was looking for in a loving way. And I began to surround her with the love and the peace that I wanted for myself but was missing while I was going through this. And I came out of this hypnotic experience, and I picked up the telephone and I called her. And I said, from now on, we go through this process in peace, if you're willing, in peace. We will not have anybody outside of us, any lawyers, anybody who is making demands on us, anyone who doesn't have our peace as their primary motive. If you're involved in contentious debates and breakups and difficulties and so on, and you hire people and have people around you whose purpose is to profit off of the struggles that you have and to keep the antagonism going, all you're doing is creating more of an energy field of non-peace. So that you want to make sure that the people who are helping you through these contentious times, whatever they might be, whether it's in a job or it's in a divorce or a breakup or anything else, you want to have people who you have representing and working with you who have as their primary and first motivation your peace. If that isn't their motivation, then you want to go to people who do have that as your guide, as your allies. And you remove the people who are looking for profitability and looking to create and extend the dissension and replace them with those who want peace for everyone involved. And the fact is, all you need is God. Because every conflict that you have any place out there in this world is not between you and them. It's between you and God. And I realized that in that hypnotic experience of the 15 steps. That it was just between me and God. And the meaning of that is, can I find within me, even though there's struggles and difficulties going on, can I find within me the ability to go to my source energy and bring that to the presence of the resolution of this? And it has been a joyous experience since then. Next, detach from the outcome. Don't let your authentic and peaceful attitude depend on anybody else's behavior. You are your own peace. Be it. And then make an affirmation. It's an affirmation that I say over and over again. And people are always wondering why I always encounter so many people who are willing to help me and want good things for me wherever I go, even strangers, wherever it might be, people who don't even know what my work is or what I do or who I am or anything. I affirm that I attract only peace and peaceful people into my life. That's my affirmation. I attract only peace and peaceful people into my life. That's all I will allow. And you know, that's all that ever seems to show up. And finally, practice forgiveness. Hold no grudges. The key to having peace in your life is to let go of all grudges and practice making amends. Here's what the Course in Miracles says about this. Do you want peace? Forgiveness offers it. Do you want happiness, a quiet mind, a certainty of purpose, and a sense of worth and beauty that transcends the world? Do you want a quietness that cannot be disturbed, a gentleness that can never be hurt, a deep, abiding comfort, and a rest so peaceful it can never be upset? Only forgiveness offers all of this to you. Forgiveness, letting go, and letting God. The third face of intention is the face of love. The face of love. Here we go back to this field of intention that creates worlds and creates everything. Everything emanates from it. It is a face that has only one word to describe it universally, and that is the face of love. Here's how Erich Fromm defined the kind of love I'm speaking about here. Infantile love, he said, follows the principle, I love because I am loved. I love because I am loved. Mature love, spiritual love, follows the principle, I am loved because I love. I am loved because I love. I attract love into my life rather than love is something that I give out in response to other people loving me. So that when you're looking at this face of intention called love, this field is home to the laws of nature and is the inner domain of every human being, the inner domain of every one of us. It's the field of all possibilities, and it's yours by virtue of your existence. Having a belief system that denies your connection to intention is the only way you are unable to access the power of intention from the infinite field. If you're convinced that you're unworthy of enjoying the field of all possibilities, then you radiate this kind of low energy. And so my intention for this face of intention is this, and it's one of the chapters in the book. It is my intention to respect myself at all times. It is my intention to respect myself at all times. Now, basically, one of the things that I believe in is that however you see the world is how you see yourself. You heard me say earlier that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it isn't just a clever statement, it is a quantum physics reality. Now I'm asking you to change the way you look at yourself and to ask yourself if you truly are seeing yourself as something that is perfectly created from the source. There's a book out that was written back in the 1930s called 3 Magic Words. And if you read 3 Magic Words, you read the whole book, and you still don't know what the 3 magic words are. They never tell you. You get to the very last paragraph of the book, and it tells you what the 3 magic words are. Written by U.S. Anderson. Anybody know? Anybody read it? I am God. I am God, meaning I am good, meaning I am love. And therefore, I am deserving always of respect. And the worst crack cocaine addict out in the inner city, someplace out there, who is waking up in his or her own vomit every day and is lost beyond what seems to be anyone who could be salvaged from that kind of a condition. The person who lives in the utmost of poverty, the person who is struggling the most in their lives, has just as much of the God force in them as the person who sits in the White House or the person who sits on any throne, any place. You see, our problems of not being able to be love and experience love and to give love and offer love, the thing that keeps us from it so often is our belief in our unworthiness to receive it. And yet this source doesn't decide that some people are worthy of it and some people aren't. It is just completely always offering this. So that every thought that you have that I am not worthy of it, it is not something that I'm entitled to, it's not something that I can have, keeps me from being able to be at intention. Now, when you're at intention, you can create virtually anything that you want, including healing your body, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next section. You can attract any amount of abundance into your life, which I'll be talking about as one of the faces of intention. Whatever it is that is your desire, that you are launching as something that you would like to have show up or work in your life, if you have as the basis of this beingness within you something called kindness and love that I have been speaking about, if you have that in there, then only thoughts can emerge, only these ideas that I'm speaking about can emerge from that. And then what happens is you attract allies who are also connected to intention through this field of love. And they will do it all for you because we don't do anything alone. And people will want to create for, just like the guy I spoke about who went to the other side of the store to just get me some smoked salmon. It was in the spirit of love. And I find that that happens for me all the time with everything. If you can conceive of it, if it's a possibility, that is, if you've got a disease process within you and you can conceive of it as leaving, if you've got an idea that you'd like to run a marathon and you're 75 years old, but you can conceive of it as a possibility that you could go out and do that, if you can conceive of it, then you will attract the loving allies and support and help that you desire, if you can conceive of it. And if you can conceive of it internally in your mind in a loving place, just like this universal source is constantly conceiving of creating, if you can conceive of it the same way in a loving field, then you will have show up for you in what Jung called synchronistic divine intervention, or almost as if you have a collaboration with fate. Dormant forces come alive. And the support system that you need is there when you are in love or loving, when you are respecting yourself as someone who can create that. And so I've offered here suggestions for making this intention your reality. Making this intention your reality. It is my intention to respect myself at all times, to live in a state of love, and to be in harmony with love. 1, I suggest, and I did this for myself at one time in my life, that you write the following affirmation out and repeat it over and over and over again until it becomes your inner mantra. I am whole and perfect as I was created. I am whole and perfect as I was created. There are no mistakes. The loving energy that brings everything from the world of spirit into the world of particles and into the world of form. And the question here is, how much of this loving source energy am I summoning at any given moment in my life? How much pulling power do I have to attract this into my life? And the more that I have loving pulling power, the more that I will attract whatever it is I need and whoever I need and the circumstances that I need, whatever. Trust me, I believe that you can change the weather with this if it's convenient for you to do so. I believe that. I think you can alter the course of anything destructive. I think you can make rain in droughted areas. And I think you can stop flooding. I think you can even make your car work for you when it stubbornly refuses to. I know that sounds strange. But if the loving source is everywhere, and there's no place that it's not, if there's no place that it is not, and everything comes from it, so it has to be everywhere at once, then it has to be in all the minerals, doesn't it? And the vegetables and the animals. Everything is made of the same stuff. So it isn't chemical makeup that distinguishes the difference between an animal and a vegetable and a rock and a human being. It's the level of love, the level of awareness that is in there. And your car, therefore, is made out of the minerals. It can't be made out of minerals that aren't here. It's not like we have a funnel coming in from Uranus. I mean, everything shows up from here. So if the universal source is everywhere, do you think you can take it out of the metals by putting them into a big fire furnace and heating them up and reshaping them into the shape of an engine and reshaping them into the shape of a car and a grill and anything else and an airplane? Do you think that the universal source of intelligence can be burned out of it or taken out because it's reshaping? Everything has this source in it. Everything. Seems to me that if it's everywhere and you're in it as well, and it's in you and it's in your car, realign yourself. People talk to their cars all the time. They think that they're nuts when they do that. Cart them off to the psychiatrist. But the fact is that it's everywhere. There's no place that it's not. So it makes sense. Secondly, extend more respect to others and all of life. Perhaps the greatest secret of self-esteem is to appreciate other people more. The easiest way to do this is to see the unfolding of God in everyone. Look past the appearance, the failures, the successes, the status, their wealth, lack of it, and extend appreciation and love to the source from which they came. Everyone is a child of God. Everyone. Try to see this even in those who behave in what appears to be godless fashion. Everyone, if we knew this and understood this, that there's only one source, it's a source of love. And that's something that we call evil, and a lot of people would like us to believe that evil exists. But if God created everything, and everything that God created is good, how can evil exist? Where could it come from? Where would it be? Evil is love going in the wrong direction. That's all it is. There's only one source. Just one. So you are either moving toward your source or away from it. When you're moving away from your source and you're practicing hatred or killing or robbery or any of those things, then you are still in the same energy field, but you're just moving away from source. You want to be able to take that energy field that is moving away from source and turn it around. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Let me bring love. And convert it. And I've seen it happen so many times. I see it happen even with my own children, where they hate and where they hate and where they hate. And when a child is filled with hatred, you don't say to a child who erupts and says, I hate you, Mommy. I hate you, Daddy. You don't respond back with, you hate me. Well, I hate you even more than you hate me. What do you think of that? You don't do that. You bring love to the presence of hatred. You bring love to the presence of hatred. And hatred dissolves. When a baby is crying in the middle of the night, you don't say to that baby, wah, I'll give you a wah, I'll give you something to wah about. I've been working my butt off all day long trying to feed you and nurse you, and you're going to call wah and annoy me with that low energy? You don't do that. You pick that baby up, you put a breast in his mouth, and you give him the milk of human kindness. That's what you do. You bring love to the presence of hatred. Then you affirm to yourself and to all others that you meet these two words, I belong. I belong. Maslow called it the highest place that you can get to in higher consciousness and self-actualization, a sense of belonging. I respect myself, I belong. And you don't do this with ego, like, I belong and you don't. It's, you have an internal awareness, I'm here. I'm here in this infinite moment right now, and I showed up here exactly on time from a universal source that makes absolutely no mistakes. There's no reason for me not to be here. There's nothing about me that isn't perfect and isn't divine, because I came from the same source that creates everything in the universe, including the universe itself. I belong. I belong. Do you know how many people don't feel like they belong? Who feel like they're lost, who feel like they don't have someone with them? People who are lost, people who are addicted, people who are suffering, people who are struggling, believe that they're alone. They'll find out in their appointment with infinity that no one is alone. And that's the next one. Remind yourself that you're never alone. You're never alone. I suggest you say, I have a senior partner, and that senior partner is with me at all times. Then I suggest that you respect your body. You've been provided with a perfect body to house your inner invisible being just for a few moments in eternity. Regardless of its size or shape or color or any imagined infirmities, it's a perfect creation for the purpose that you were intended here. You don't have to work at getting healthy. Health is something you already have if you don't disturb it. You may have disturbed your healthy body by overfeeding it or under-exercising it or overstimulating it with toxins or drugs that make it sick or fatigued or jumpy or anxious or depressed or bloated or ornery. But you can begin the fulfillment of this intention to live a life of self-respect by respecting the temple that houses you. As the Sufis say, if you don't have a temple in your heart, you'll never find your heart in a temple. You have to have a temple in your heart and treat your body that way. And then, as always, meditate to stay in conscious contact with your source. Always, it's about meditation. When people ask me, what would you do if you were king? If you had the problems of the Middle East to face, where these hatreds just seem to go on and on and on and on and on, and people killing each other, and suicide bombers, and people endlessly having these hatreds. I said, what I would do if I were king and could just make everybody do what I told them to do, I would take 20 or 30 million people and surround the entire Middle East, all of it, and I would have them do nothing but meditate. Every single one of them. Just send out the loving, conscious contact with God, practicing japa, repeating the sound of God until the word got out there. And you can't be unhappy and miserable when you are in meditation, because every moment that you have of hatred means you've left God, you've left good. You don't feel good. Whenever you don't feel good and you don't feel God, you have left source energy. All I would like to do is help that entire region, and the regions in Africa, and the regions in Indonesia, is to get people to go within, to make conscious contact with God, to radiate out that consciousness, and be the love that you are seeking for yourself, and be the peace that you are seeking for yourself. It is my intention to respect myself at all times. It is my intention to respect myself at all times. I'd like to close out this face of intention with an observation from the Apostle Matthew, Matthew 5:48. And I'm always quoting this because so many people just don't get the message of what Matthew was saying. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Be love, therefore, as your heavenly Father is love. Our source is perfect. Our objective is to be just as our source was before we showed up here in this physical form. Be perfect, therefore, as your source is. This fourth phase of intention, that when I was writing it one morning, it came to me that it's beauty, This universal source, that allows everything to show up into the world, has an expression. It is my intention to live a stress-free life. It is my intention to live a stress-free life. I think what happens as you get more and more connected to Source is that you begin to see beauty everywhere. Again, we go back to a universal source that is capable of creating. So you ask yourself the question, why would a source that is capable of creating anything, why would it create anything that was anathema to itself? Why would it create anything that it didn't see as beauty? And there's an observation from a poem. I wrote a book a few years ago called Wisdom of the Ages. And I wrote 60 essays based upon 60 of the most powerful and important teachings that I had ever encountered in my life. And there was a man that I studied in this book. His name was John Keats. And John Keats died at the age of 24. Was known as the greatest Victorian poet of all time. I mean, he was just considered to be the spokesperson for the Victorian age and wrote thousands of poems. As a young teenager, he started producing this, and his life was filled with all of these various tragedies. He lost his brother, and he had lost a lot of people in his family and so on, and a lot of struggles in his life. And he wrote a line in Ode on a Grecian Urn. It was the last two lines of that poem. Most of you will recognize these two lines. And I wrote a whole essay about it, but I must confess at this point that I don't think I really understood it as completely as I do now after having written The Power of Intention. And that you have to look at this source of intention as being something that is fundamentally truth. Throughout the Power versus Force, Hawkins speaks about the inability to be able to distinguish truth from falsehood as the distinguishing characteristic of energies that either strengthen or weaken you. So that any thought that is a falsehood is something that will weaken you. And that people who are calibrated at a level below what he calls 200 on his scale of 1 to 1,000, anybody who calibrates below 200 lives in a place where they can't make a distinction between truth and falsehood. But the body is a perfect element of truth. It emanates from this place called truth. And then as we get into ego consciousness, what happens is most of us take on thoughts that are removed from truth, but the body can only respond to truth, and that's why kinesthesiology is such a dramatic way of determining whether something is true or not. And you ask the body a question, and it instantaneously responds, and it can only respond to that which is truth by making you strong, and it will always make you weak if you're responding to a falsehood. And what he says is that something like 87% of the population calibrates below 200. 87% of the population. So that that means that 87% of the population cannot make a distinction between truth and falsehood. That is, if you tell them to go out and kill someone that is their assigned enemy, they will do it just because they've simply been told, even though thou shalt not kill is something that they are violating. You know, not killing, it doesn't say in those 10 commandments that everyone is so proud of that thou shalt not kill except in the following conditions. It just simply says killing is something that we don't do. We don't practice, we don't allow. And that means in all aspects of our lives. And so whenever you are doing something that is a violation of these fundamental spiritual truths, the body will react with weakness. All right? So you go to this source and you realize that it is truth. And this is what John Keats said. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. This idea that beauty and truth are synonymous. So that one of the faces of intention is this thing called beauty. And what happens as you start reconnecting to intention is that you begin to see beauty everywhere. You begin to see it in faces that other people call unattractive or ugly. You begin to see it in like just the observation of a spider web. You have to recognize that when you don't see beauty in anything, including yourself, you are disconnected from source. And when you're disconnected from source, you cannot attract into your life what it is that you want. Because beauty is like becoming an appreciator in life, rather than a depreciator. You begin to find a reason to think of things as beautiful. You start looking for it, and you start noticing it, and it becomes a very important part of your life. I was very blessed in 1978. I was 38 years old. I had been fortunate enough to have a couple of books atop the New York Times bestseller list for 27 months. I was invited by an organization called YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. And they have these universities where they bring together large groups of people from all different fields, and they bring them to a particular location. They pay all of your expenses. They don't pay the speakers, but they provide you with an opportunity to speak to all of these presidents, and they fly you to these exotic places. And it's just it's a wonderful organization. Many young presidents. This is for people under 50 who have become presidents of corporations with certain amounts of resources and employees and so on. So they called me up, and I didn't know anything about YPO. And they asked me if I'd like to come to Vienna in Austria and to address about 1,000 young presidents from all over the world. They told me what they would do, and they would send my wife and I over there and so on. So, of course, we went. And it was a beautiful experience. And on the same program, with me, in the same panel, myself and this other gentleman and one lady were to address this audience, and then we were to take questions from the audience. And I was talking about your erroneous zones and pulling your own strings. And I addressed the audience, and then Virginia Satir addressed the audience. She's a family therapist and a brilliant woman. And then Viktor Frankl was the third member of this panel. And I was in such awe that I was in the same city with Viktor Frankl, let alone at the same conference, let alone on the same panel, let alone interacting with him and sharing what wisdom I had with this man who had been a survivor of the Holocaust. He had made it his intention that he was going to survive. He was a famous doctor. He was removed. He was put into the Warsaw Ghetto, and he had all of his possessions taken away from him. And here he had gone from being this brilliant medical doctor to being a prisoner. And he decided that he had to survive because he had to tell the story. He had to tell it somehow. And he kept little notes on little pieces of paper, and he would stuff them and hide them from the Nazis and so on. And he talked about how people, how so many of the people in the concentration camps would die the day that they believed that they were being liberated, and the liberation would come and go, or the day would come and the liberation wouldn't be there. So that people would believe that on April the 1st, 1944, and they had a vision that they were going to be liberated, and then they weren't liberated, and the next day they would die. And on the death certificate, he said it would say, died of tuberculosis. But in fact, he said they died of no longer having any meaning in their life. In many ways, I felt, and I even said that at this conference, that they were liberated because they left and they rejoined their source. Their appointment with infinity was complete. But he just had to tell this story. He survived, just barely. And when he finished his book, it was called Man's Search for Meaning. And it was one of the great classics of all time. And he wrote a whole basis of therapy, a therapeutic approach to healing based upon what he called logotherapy, which I studied and lectured on at the university where I was teaching before that, at St. John's University in New York. I gave lectures on Viktor Frankl and logotherapy and Man's Search for Meaning and so on. And here I was, this beginner, this person in the infantile stage of his own development, sharing the stage with Viktor Frankl. And he told a story. And the story that he told that afternoon in Vienna was one I was never to forget. And he had the audience in tears, but he had me in awe. He told the story of how he had to find beauty in the most horrendous of circumstances in order to be able to survive. He said they would feed them, they would bring the food, and the Nazis spent as much energy as they possibly could on humiliating and taking away these people's purpose, their meaning in life. And they would bring them a bowl of soup, and it would just be dirty water. And the dirty water would have a fish head. I've never forgotten this image, a fish head floating in this dirty water. And that would be their meal for the day. And he said, I had to find beauty in a floating fish head in dirty, filthy water in order to survive. Beauty, even in the worst of circumstances. And I didn't feel that I had much to share that afternoon from Pulling Your Own Strings and Erroneous Zones. And I was just so deeply, deeply honored. It was one of the great honors of my life to have met and been on a panel with Dr. Viktor Frankl. Finding beauty in the most troubling and difficult of times is the challenge. As you get closer and closer and connect more and more to Source, you start seeing beauty in the circumstances that so many of us find appalling or difficult. Imagine being able to find beauty as Viktor Frankl did back there in the times of the Holocaust. And to be able to then have meaning, and the meaning, he said, was in beauty. It's understanding the distinction between being an appreciator and a depreciator in life. An appreciator, if you buy a home and your home is valued at $100,000 and then it appreciates, let's say the next year it's worth $125,000 because it appreciated. What has happened? What does appreciation mean? It means that it adds value, doesn't it? So when something appreciates, it gets more valuable. And when you buy an automobile, and you drive that automobile off of the lot, and they say to you, it's just depreciated by 25%. It's worth 25% less now. If you try to resell it back, you get 25% less. It has what? It has gone down in value. It's a good way to look at this concept of beauty and appreciation. It's one of the things that Maslow said, that self-actualizing people is one of the qualities that he spoke about on his pyramid. That as you get higher and higher and higher on this scale, that you begin to become an appreciator of beauty. It's something that starts showing up and you start seeing it and you start looking for it rather than looking for something to depreciate, because every time you depreciate yourself, someone else, something else, you have removed yourself from truth, from beauty. Beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. You've removed yourself from that. And when you remove yourself from your source, you lose the power of your source. This is a program about the power of intention. And the power of intention is the power to add value, to appreciate in your life. So you become this appreciator rather than a depreciator, and you don't look for the things that are going wrong. As Rumi said, you sell your cleverness and you purchase bewilderment. You purchase awe. You go around in a state of awe about everything. I love this story. It's told by Guru Mai, a wonderful woman, a beautiful divine being. And she tells this story in a wonderful book that I love. It's called Kindle My Heart. She tells this story. There was a man who did not like his in-laws because they felt they took up more space in the house than they should. He went to a teacher who lived nearby, as he had heard a lot about him, and he said, please do something. I cannot bear my in-laws anymore. I love my wife, but my in-laws, never. They take up so much space in the house. Somehow I feel they're always in my way. The teacher asked him, do you have any chickens? Sure, he said, I have chickens. He said, then put all your chickens inside the house. And he did what the teacher said and went back to him, and the teacher said, "Is your problem solved?" He said, "Solved? It's worse." He said, "Do you have any sheep?" He said, "Yes, I have sheep." He said, "Bring all the sheep inside." So he brought all the sheep inside, and then he returned to the teacher, and he said, "Is the problem solved?" He said, "No, it's getting worse every day." He said, "Do you have a dog?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I have several." He said, "Take all of your dogs and put them in the house with the chickens and the sheep." So finally the man ran back to the teacher and said, "I came to you for help, but you're making my life worse than it ever was." And the teacher said to him, "Now, send all the chickens and the sheep and the dogs back outside." The man went home and emptied the house of all the animals, and there was so much space, he went back to the teacher and said, thank you. You solved all my problems." Isn't that a great story? So every time you think about having a problem, think about bringing some sheep and some dogs and some chickens and bring them into your house and then empty them. So the intention here with beauty is that when you become an appreciator of beauty, your life is emptied of stress. And that's why this intention to live a stress-free life is so powerful. A stress-free life. It is my intention to have that. Here are two observations that I love about stress and beauty. Thomas Merton, he said, anxiety is the mark of spiritual insecurity. And here's Paramananda. So long as we believe in our heart of hearts that our capacity is limited and we grow anxious and unhappy, we are lacking in faith. One who truly trusts in God has no right to be anxious about anything. Anxiety and stress are impossible when you're connected to Source, when you're totally connected to Source. The things that we have come to take mountains and mountains of prescription drugs for this thing called stress, is something that is resolvable by connecting back to your Source. Because beauty is truth, and truth is Source. And being connected to Source really removes all potential for stress. And it goes back to those 5 words, I intend to feel good, meaning I intend to feel God. And one of the ways that we remove this stress and anxiety from our life is to become an appreciator rather than a depreciator in our life. And it is also to understand and begin to live rule number 6. It was written out in a book by Benjamin and Rosamund Zander. It's called The Art of Possibilities. And they wrote about rule number 6. And I'm going to share rule number 6 here with you. 2 prime ministers are sitting in a room discussing the affairs of state. Suddenly a man bursts into the room, apoplectic with fury, shouting and stamping and banging his fist on the desk. And the resident prime minister admonishes him and says, Peter, kindly remember rule number 6. Whereupon Peter is instantly restored to complete calm, apologizes, and withdraws. The politicians return to their conversation only to be interrupted yet again 20 minutes later by an hysterical woman gesticulating wildly, her hair flying. Again, the intruder is greeted with the words, Marie, please, remember rule number 6. Complete calm descends once more, and she too withdraws with a bow and an apology. When the scene is repeated for a 3rd time, the visiting prime minister addresses his colleague. My dear friend, he said, I've seen many things in my life, but never anything as remarkable as this. Would you be willing to share with me the secret of rule number 6? Very simply, replied the resident prime minister, rule number 6 is, don't take yourself so goddamn seriously. Ah, said the visitor, that's a fine rule. after a moment of pondering, he inquires, "And what, may I ask, are the other rules?" "Oh, there aren't any." Not a great story? Rule number 6. And I wrote that out and quoted it and used it in Power of Intention. And that afternoon, I had to go over to the drugstore to pick up a prescription for one of my children. And I was standing there in line waiting to pick up my prescription. And the woman who was in front of me was the woman who is always picking up a prescription someplace. And into a long discussion about whether or not her insurance will cover this or won't cover it, and then doesn't have quite the right card number, and then can't find her credit card to pay for it, so now she's going to take out some cash, but she doesn't have quite enough cash, but she's got some change in her purse, and she's going to find the change, and 5 minutes go by, and 10 minutes go by, and 15 minutes go by, and she's still up there in a hassle state with this poor clerk who can't please her no matter what, and she shouldn't have to pay this amount, she should pay this amount because she has this deductible, because Medicare didn't cover this, because that was covered under that. And I'm standing back there waiting to pick up this simple little antibiotic for one of my children, and getting more and more upset about this woman who seems to follow me around. Sometimes she's in front of me getting gas, and sometimes she's driving down the freeway and she's in the lane that I want. And, you know, she just moves around a lot. You know, she'll be at the grocery store, and most of you have seen her. She's very busy, you know. And I'm getting more and more upset, and I'm thinking about how important I've got to get someplace else. And then I stop and I say, rule number 6, stop taking yourself so goddamn seriously. You know? And I stop back, and the stress seems to go away, and I get more peaceful. And in that day, just that one day that I had written that one story out, I had 4 or 5 occasions to implement rule number 6, to stop taking myself so seriously. And when you do that, you become, and suddenly I began to appreciate her, watching her counting her little pennies out and her nickels and her dimes, and watching her take out this card and that card, and sort of trying to predict what her next argument was going to be about trying to get these drugs for nothing, and so on. And it became an exercise in sort of appreciation rather than depreciation. I stopped taking myself so seriously, and lo and behold, I was more at peace. And it's a very important and powerful rule, I think, and something to really work at applying in our lives. What kind of resistance do we create to being in this face of beauty and appreciation and reduction of stress? And the resistance almost always is in the form of our thoughts. The ways to determine what this resistance is to go within and experience, what emotions am I experiencing right now? What emotional state am I in? Am I anxious? Am I upset? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I fearful? What emotion am I experiencing in my body? Now, you use this emotion as a system, as a barometer for determining what kinds of thoughts am I having right now that are inconsistent with the energy of source. In other words, how would my source be thinking? What energy, frequency would I be at? Where would source energy be in relationship to where I am now? Now, source energy is only a place of beauty. It's beauty, it's kindness, it's love, creativity. It's these faces of intention that I'm speaking about. And my thoughts are not in harmony with that. So what can I do to bring them into harmony? So here are a few. I've just put out a few of these, what I call resistance versus non-resistance to reducing stress in my life. Resistance. I feel uneasy about the state of the economy. I've already lost so much money. And in a place that I play tennis down in Florida, at a tennis club I belong to, they run a cable television show all day long that has the stock market quotations just running along the bottom all day, 24 hours a day. And it'll have arrows pointing to whether it's down or arrows pointing to whether it's up. And I see all of these guys in there, and they're just sitting in there studying how anxious they are about these numbers that are going up and down. Meantime, they've got more money they've got more money than God. And they're still sitting there being anxious about this. And I always tell them to think from the end. Just think from the end. Think in ways that don't allow you to be anxious. Think as if what you would like to have is already here. I asked one of these guys one time, I said, and he thinks from the end, but he uses it in the wrong way, or uses it in a neurotic way. He'd been sick. And I said to him, how long have you had this thing in your chest? He said, in 3 weeks, it'll be a month. So, I mean, you can use this in a way that is working against you as well as in a way that's working for you. So here's a resistant thought. I feel anxious about the state of the economy. Here is a non-resistant thought. I live in an abundant universe. I choose to think about what I have and I will be fine. The universe will provide. No resistance. Resistance. I have so many things to do, I can never get caught up. Non-resistance. I'm at peace in this moment, and I'll only think about one thing that I'm doing. I won't have stressful thoughts. Resistance. I can never get ahead in this job. Non-resistance. I choose to appreciate what I'm doing right now, and I'll attract an even greater opportunity. Resistance. My health is a huge concern. I worry about getting old and become dependent and sick. Non-resistance. I'm healthy, I think healthy. I live in a universe that attracts healing, and I refuse to anticipate sickness. They did a study on the difference between people over the age of 70 who get sick versus the people over the age of 70 who do not get sick much in their life. And the one variable that seemed to distinguish those who spend a lot of time over the age of 70 in sickness versus those who don't is that what those people thought when they were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. If their belief system was that when you get old, you get sick, when you get old, you decline, things go wrong. But yet there's nothing in our DNA, and there's nothing in this universe that ever says or suggests that we have to decline as our body puts more years on it. That's only a belief system that we've handled and taken on. And if you don't take that belief system on, you have a different form of connecting to source. And when you do connect to source in the way that I'm speaking about, illness just isn't one of the things that you anticipate getting worse. It isn't something that you put a lot of attention on. And you certainly don't talk about all the things that are going on in your body that you don't like, unless you want those things in your body to continue to progress in the ways that you talk about them. Resistance. My family members are causing me to feel anxious and fearful. Non-resistance. I choose thoughts which make me feel good, and this will help me to uplift those family members in need. I choose to think that way. Resistance. I don't deserve to feel good when so many people are suffering. Non-resistance. I didn't come into a world where everyone is going to have the same identical experiences. I'll feel good, and by being uplifted, I'll help eradicate some of the suffering. I'll feel good. You can't get sick enough to heal one person on this planet. Resistance. I can't be happy when the person I really love loves another and has abandoned me. Non-resistance. Feeling bad won't change this scenario. I trust that love will return to my life. If I'm in harmony with the loving source, I choose to feel good right now and focus on what I have rather than on what's missing. I trust that everything that happens is for my well-being, even being left behind, even being left for another, even being abandoned. I trust that it's in my best interest. And that's how I choose to think. I want to feel good. Okay? So that's a bit about beauty and beauty appreciation and reducing stress. I've put up here a few observations on things that I think you can do to implement this into your life. Here's my, I call it making your intentions your reality. One, remember your natural state is joy. And you came from a source that creates nothing but that which it is in love with, which is beautiful, which means you. You are a product of joy and love. It's natural for you to experience these feelings. 2, your thoughts, not the world, cause your stress. There's no stress in the world. You cannot go out and get a container and fill it with stress and bring it home. It's an illusion. The world is the way that it is. There are only people thinking stressful thoughts. Your thoughts activate stressful reactions in your body. Stressful thoughts create resistance to the joy, harmony, and abundance which you deserve to create in your life. 3, monitor your stressful thoughts by checking on your emotional state right in the moment. Ask yourself this key question: do I feel good right now? Do I feel good? If the answer is no, then repeat those 5 magic words. I want to feel good. I intend to feel good. 4, make a conscious choice to select a thought that will activate your feeling good. Ask yourself the question, does this new thought make me feel good? No? Well, how about this thought? No? Well, how about this thought? No? And you keep going through an inventory of thoughts until you come up with one that makes you feel good. And as you do this, it's like a simple little exercise. I don't feel good. This one feels better. This one feels better. And ultimately, you'll come to one where you feel good. That's the one you pick. Number 5, keep rule number 6 in mind. This means to suspend the demands of your ego, which keep you separated from intention. Stop taking yourself so seriously. That's your ego at work. Oh yeah, and the ego is a fierce competitor. It doesn't want to hear any of this. I remember one of the things we had to do when we were learning about this with one of the great teachers, is we had to do a meditation in which we sat in a room, and then we would leave our bodies in our mind, and we would observe ourselves from the ceiling of the room, looking at ourselves in the room. Then we would have to leave the ceiling and go out on the roof of the building that we were in, and we would have to look down through the ceiling and then see ourselves sitting there meditating. Then we would have to get out of the building altogether and get into an airplane and look down from the sky at the community that we were in, and then we would have to find the building in our mind, and then we would have to find the room, and then we would have to see ourselves sitting over there in the corner meditating. Then we'd have to get into a satellite, and we'd have to find the country, and then we'd have to find the state, and then we'd have to find the city, and then the county, and then the community, and we'd have to isolate the building, and then we'd have to go through the building and down in, and find ourselves looking there at ourselves, sitting there meditating. And ultimately, we had to get outside of the universe altogether, and we had to find the earth. And we had to look through the earth and find the continent and then find the whole thing, go all the way down till we found ourselves sitting there. We had to go through this whole observational thing in the mind. It's a wonderful thing. You can do it in your mind. Then we had to do the ultimate, the one that the ego rejects the most. We had to try to imagine the earth as we're looking at it from outer space without us on it. Try right now to imagine the whole earth, the entire planet, and you're not on it. And your ego says, what's the point? What do we need an earth for if I'm not on it? It just has no need. There's no value. There's no reason for that. That's how strong the ego is, the ego's determination to keep you isolated from your source. The belief that the only reason that there is a universe out there in the first place is to satisfy you. That's your piddly little ego speaking, imagining that this tiny little sunbeam, this tiny little ripple, is the sun and the ocean. Okay? 7, practice being in a state of silence and meditation always. Meditation is the greatest stress reliever and the greatest way to appreciate beauty. And finally, 8, accept the guidance of your source of intention. I believe that God's desire for all of us is that we not only know joy, but that we become it, that we are joy. Accept this guidance of your source of intention. Okay, so that's stress, and that's beauty, and that's the 4th face of intention.